the Eastern standpoint, Tom, it really wasn't much of a season. Here you had a team with an 8-7-1 record in first place, battling a team with 8-8 in second place for the right to go on to meet a team that was vastly superior, the Edmonton Eskimos. Not a vintage year in '80 in the CFL East, but I think that year led to the improvements, the signings you're seeing this time around.
And do you feel that the signings of some of the big names like Ferragamo, White Shoes Johnson, and other people are going to help the East become more competitive with the West?
Yeah, it gave them, you know, a chance to be more offensive-minded, which they had to be. The East really was playing very defensive football through '80 and '79 as well, but '80 it reached an all-time low. Now the emphasis on a big-name quarterback, running back, Overstreet from Miami Dolphin draft choice. Some good people around this league now in the East will, I think, highlight the play there.
Pat, in the Western Division, of course, you have Edmonton, but you also have some other pretty good football teams with some pretty good football players. Saskatchewan really the only weak link in that division.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that Saskatchewan is necessarily a weak link in 1981, but let me say something. It was imperative that the Eastern Conference improve because the CFL has gone to a complete interlocking schedule this year, which means that the East has to play the Western teams on 2 occasions, not just the hit and miss that it was last year. So the East has to be much better if there's going to be balance between those 2 conferences, and believe me, there will be balance, as Don has suggested. But let's talk about the Western Conference because they are the dominating factor in the league. The Edmonton Eskimos are as good a football team and as sound an operation as any in any league where the game of football is played. And I include the National Football League, and I'll tell you, when you talk about the Edmonton Eskimos, you're talking about an organization like the Dallas Cowboys. Sound right throughout the entire thing, super coaching staff, great scouting, and just very good management. But the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, who surprised a lot of people last year because of the outstanding quarterbacking of Dieter Brock, who went on to win the Shenley Award as the top player in the CFL, really did a number. Brock was outstanding last year. I personally don't believe he can repeat as effectively as he did in 1980, but let's give him his marks for doing it last year.
Well, speaking of Winnipeg and Edmonton, of course, they met for the Western Conference Championship and the right to go on to meet Hamilton in the Grey Cup. Let's take a look at that Western final now, the highlights from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, as the homestanding Eskimos took on Dieter Brock and the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Bombers coming in, Pat, 10-6, Edmonton 13-3.
Well, I was there that day, and it was an outstanding autumn afternoon in late November, and the Winnipeg Blue Bombers came in and tried to surprise some people. Well, as a matter of fact, the people they surprised were the Edmonton Eskimos. Watch Brock now. Throws complete to Joe Poplowski, a Canadian boy, an outstanding receiver who 2 years ago suffered a broken leg and missed most of the season. But Brock had a great year. And this is the kind of thing that he did all season long. Touchdown to Rick House in the end zone, and believe me, those Eskimos were very concerned. They knew the explosive ability. Dave Cutler tried to narrow the gap with a field goal, but it went wide, and now you see the rouge, the single point, as it was conceded. I'll tell you, the Eskimos thought they were going to get off lucky here, not to be. Look at it, picked off by Reggie Pearson, and he goes all the way for the major score, and I'll tell you, 43,000 people are sitting at Commonwealth Stadium at Edmonton saying, what's going on? Warren Moon said, well, I'll show you what's going on. We've got the best offense in the league, and just give me a few minutes and we'll get it together. Watch, Brian Fryer down to the 1-yard line, and when Edmonton gets that close, there is no way you're going to stop them. This is Jim Germany, an outstanding running back, does his job, gets his 1,000 yards year in and year out, and he really is the primary running threat that the Eskimos have. But Warren Moon from the University of Washington, what a football player.
He was a pretty good one, too.
Not bad either. Yeah. Neil Lumsden, he's another Canadian boy, a power back that should never have been able to get away from the Eastern Conference as he did. Moon, right on the money. How do you like that one, too? Tommy Scott, what an afternoon he had then and also the next week in the Grey Cup. Moon one more time. This is Stu Lang, a Canadian boy, in for the touchdown, and the Eskimos are on the way back. But I'll tell you, the Blue Bombers aren't going to fold. They worked too hard to get where they did this afternoon, except maybe, well, Warren Moon can always supply a lot of answers, except this time he did not. Vince Faison steps in front of the intended receiver. We get a face mask call, and lo and behold, the Blue Bombers are knocking on the door one more time. Couple of unsuccessful attempts. Brock says, I'll keep it myself, goes in for the major score, and the Eskimos are truly concerned at this point. Dave Cutler doesn't miss very often. And I'll tell you, he did not miss on this occasion. 3 points, but the Blue Bombers are still out in front.
He broke Blanda's record last year.
Well, I'll tell you, the guy's an outstanding field goal kicker. This guy's an outstanding quarterback. Warren Moon, wide open in the middle was Neil Lumsden. runs over people.
The punishing
tough to
runner.
bring down, absolutely. Big fella, sets up this strike to Stu Lang, Moon to Stu Lang to the 2-yard line. And as I say, Edmonton just does not foul up in tight. This is Lumsden for the major score.
And the Edmonton faithful, of course, know now that their team is well on the way towards another Grey Cup title. They had won 2 straight before the 1980 season, and they win the game over Winnipeg. Now, in the East, Don, Montreal-Hamilton, a game of missed opportunities, and you might think so with those records.
Well, wasted opportunities, Tom, really, for the Alouettes in the opening half. Now, they're the visiting team. They chose to accept the opening kickoff, and a good back with the net of Skip Walker put Montreal into tremendous shape here right off the start. Number 32, Walker, weaving through people, getting it down for Montreal's quarterback, Jerry Detillier, to set something up. But you see Hamilton, always tough defensively at home. Detillier not having a very sharp day throwing the ball. Time and time again had plays like this broken up by the Hamilton defenders. Jerry Anderson there as he went for Peter Della Riva. So, field goal time. Had to settle for 3 if they could. And here is rookie Jerry McGrath. He cranks it wide, and once again, an example of a single point. Now, this man must run the ball out, or as he does, concede the 1 point. So it was 1-0 for Montreal there.
Detillier again missing.
So Nikaraki is good tight end.
And Mr. McGrath again.
This time he hits it. It's 4-0 now, Montreal in the first quarter of the Eastern Final.
But this typified the entire Eastern Conference season. It was field goal after field goal after field goal.
Now here we see Marler, Dave Marler out of Mississippi State running the Hamilton attack.
He inherited the quarterbacking job last year, will give way to Tom Clements back from the NFL this year. A good young prospect, has it almost picked off there by the Montreal secondary.
That brings on Bernie Ruoff.
Ruoff for a field goal. Both these teams struggling offensively. Much of the play in midfield, and they're getting close. This is all they can do in a scoring sense. So Hamilton's on the board there.
That makes the score 4-3. Now, with Hamilton with the ball, Marler in the shotgun formation has it picked off.
Woodrow Wilson picks it off for the Alouettes once again now in the second quarter, down to the 30-yard line. Great position for Jerry Detillier on the offense. However, more Montreal frustration mounting.
Fred Biletnikoff can't hang on.
Boy, that stickum he wears, or did wear, if he can't catch it, nobody can this day. Once again, roll action from Jerry Detillier, and he'll go with the ball this time. And he gets the first down to keep it going for the Alouettes inside the 20, draws the flag, now down to the 10-yard line. Sends David Green ahead of him into the end zone. Biletnikoff cannot hang on to that one either. Good defensive work by Hamilton. Here's the charge. Detillier down in a pile. Another Montreal touchdown scoring drive denied by the Hamilton defenders. The field goal attempt by McGrath. It is good. So Montreal's struggling in that first half, ahead 7-3. Talk about defense with the Alouettes. Number 45 to come in from the left of your screen here. Tom Cousineau to break up that pass near the goal line. A fine middle linebacker.
So Mr. Ruoff, it's another field goal.
Another field goal. 7-6 Montreal after all that offense. That was the score in the first half. Just 13 points between them in the Eastern Final.
All right,
And the second half starts almost the same way, Tom. Look at Montreal on deep the yard. 25-yard line. Detillier taken down and has to give it up right there. There's a short pass that works out to Skip Walker. Montreal not getting all the yardage they required, so another field goal. McGrath, 27 yards. It is 10-6. We got accustomed to seeing field goals that day.
Looks like the old NFL with all the field goals. Here's a break for Montreal.
Block kick, partially blocked. Now Hamilton recovers the ball, but did not have enough yards for a first down, so a gift for the Alouettes once again. Pat, look at the chances they had that day. As you look at it now, it's amazing how they lost that Eastern Final.
That's why they have a new quarterback this year.
They've almost had a new coach.
Keith Baker drops one here. Of course, this year, Baker is with Hamilton.
Yes, he was the price the Alouettes had to pay, along with David Green, for the rights to Vince Ferragamo. Another field goal makes it 13-6, the measure now of a converted touchdown. But that's about all Montreal had. Here's the biggest play of the game for the Cats. Obie Graves, used sparingly throughout the 80 season, came on late with his team. He turns it downfield inside the 10-yard line, a big run on the final play of the third quarter. And as they change ends, Hamilton was in high gear finally offensively. Marler, the veteran Canadian Gordy Patterson for the touchdown that pulls Hamilton even. John Payne, no longer a head coach there, pretty happy about that.
Doesn't pay to win.
No, he went all the way to the Grey Cup and lost his job. Fumbled by Walker. A big turnover for Hamilton. Carl Cornell in there for the Tiger Cats. And They'll try a long field goal from Ruoff that hits bit by bit. Hamilton taking control now with time running out on the Alouettes in the second half. McGrath punting it away. This a big run back. Watch 37 Dave Shaw and the people he picks his way through to run downfield.
Shaw out of Prairie View A&M, which has produced several top running backs and other football players in the NFL.
He's a great defensive halfback. He truly is.
He could play anywhere. Dave Shaw. So with a setup by Shaw, Marler back to work once again. He'll try the left side. Gets down inside the 5-yard line there on that strike. And we'll look for Gordy Patterson once again. The man who caught the previous touchdown. Same play, really. Roll right, pop out to him. Patterson for the touchdown that put it all away. Hamilton defeating Montreal and advancing against Edmonton in the Grey Cup game.
Final score in that one was 24-13, and of course the Grey Cup was held in Toronto's Exhibition Stadium. The Tiger Cats, huge underdogs, November 23rd of last year against the Edmonton Eskimos. Both you gentlemen worked that game. I believe, Pat, you did the first half of that game. Let's see how it unfolded.
Well, Edmonton didn't really get untracked in the first few minutes of that ball game, as you saw Warren Moon throw a little high over his intended receiver. He comes back to the end zone this time with no more success than he had in the first down. Watch as he looks for Tom Scott, I believe, in the end zone this time. Tommy goes down, the ball is over everybody's head, and that brings Dave Cutler onto the field. Now, as you mentioned, Tom, the Eskimos were prohibitive favorites. I mean, they were supposed to blow Hamilton off the field. After that field goal, they lead 3-0. But the Ticats don't want to lay down and play dead, so let's watch and see what happens.
Danny Bugs had a long reception from Warren Moon.
And Bugs gets it down to the 1-yard line. The former Washington Redskins set up the touchdown by Jim Germany. So the Eskimos are out in front, but Bernie Ruoff's back. This is Hamilton's favorite play from the Eastern Conference of 1980, and Ruoff is good. So they narrow the lead, and once again, Ruoff comes back to make it a 10-6 ball game.
Now, this is realize, Tom, I was going to say it was 10-6 with about 4 minutes to go in the first half, and then it all turned around.
The floodgates open.
Yeah, right about here.
And Warren Moon will run now. He sees his receivers covered, and of course this man has some speed from the University of Washington. Had a new Rose Bowl victory not too long ago. Gets deep inside Hamilton territory.
He's quickly establishing himself as the best quarterback in the league, but he's been brought along nice and slowly. That's why he's been so effective. This is Tom Scott, and Scott on this day will score 3 touchdowns. That was not one of them. But look at the job that Warren Moon does here. And you wonder why he didn't throw the ball. We're going to show you after this play why he decided to keep it. Take a look at some of the action as it goes on deep downfield.
Stu Lang here. See you later.
Meets Harold Woods, and Harold says, "How do you do, Stuart?" That's the end of Lang for that particular play.
Jim Germany once again will finish off this Edmonton drive.
Well, as a matter of fact, he faked the Germany, and then Moon pulled it back, as he did so often at the University of Washington, and was able to get outside, bring it down to the 1-yard line where, well, as a matter of fact, they gave him the touchdown, I think, because they were going to until Germany decided, wait a sec, I want to be able to carry the ball the next play, and he did.
17-6 at this point. There's Warren Moon again.
See, you've got to be able to do this in the CFL. You're not supposed to fumble, but you've got to be able to scramble when everything else breaks down.
All right, Marler trying to strike now after that break, but he'll have his first pass intercepted by Joe Holloman deep in Edmonton territory, and that was one of the biggest plays of the first half. Now Moon hits Brian Kelly for a 75-yard touchdown shortly after that interception, and all of a sudden it's 24-6 with still 2:14 left in the half.
And that really was the ball game at that stage.
Watch this play,
pulling away.
This is a great misdirection play. Just watch. Instead of snapping the ball back to the punter, they direct snap it to the fullback, Neil Lumsden. Dan Kempley throwing the blocks for him, wide open down to the 15-yard line. This is the play we should take a look at one more time. We'll circle the fullback. It's just a straight punt formation. The indirect snap goes
the middle open up there.
Yeah, look at Kempley.
Number 42 leading him.
And this action, of course, early in the third quarter as Edmonton came out to really finish the job that most people thought they had in the first half.
They are so complete, the football team, as you saw them rub it in a little bit on that last play, and now the conventional offense goes back. Scott, time and time again, as Pat said, 3 touchdowns on the day. He set a Grey Cup record for receivers by hauling in the 3, rolling on the move there. He was knocked down, so he crossed the line, Tom Scott, for one of his majors right there, number 22. He and Warren Moon, of course, teammates at Washington. Now, when it's bad, it gets very bad. Marler stripped of the ball down there. Another turnover for the Eskimos inside the 3-yard line. All they get there, though, is the field goal by David Cutler as they add 3 more points to their lead.
Warren Moon now continuing on the offense, and again he has a wide open receiver. That's Fryer.
Brian Fryer is a Canadian boy who went to the camp of the Washington Redskins and was actually taxied one season before coming back to Edmonton.
And Moon again.
Protection.
Yeah, look at all that time.
Pitch and catch, pitch and catch. That was the story of the second half.
Harold Woods, however, on that play.
Deep again in Hamilton territory, and Moon again for the touchdown.
Hamilton was so dispirited at that point, there was no way that they were going to mount anything.
Here's an old one, but a good one. Wilkinson, the quarterback.
Yes, perhaps the last time seeing him, although he says he'll be back with the Eskimos, throwing that final touchdown pass. He wasn't sure if he would retire, but the Eskimos champions a 3rd year in a row.
So the final score of that Grey Cup game from 1980, November 23rd of last year to be exact, in Exhibition Stadium, the Edmonton Eskimos 48 and the Hamilton Tiger Cats 10, and of course no big surprise there, Edmonton really rolling it up. You heard it to the 1981 CFL preview on ESPN. I'm Tom Mees, joined by Don Chevrier and Pat Marsden, and gentlemen, we spoke before the last break about several rules differences between the NFL and the CFL. I suppose we should begin with the field. There is a difference in size and width. We'll show the people right now, and I'll ask you two to comment on it.
Well, the difference, of course, is one field is 110 yards long, 65 yards wide. That's the Canadian field. There you see the 65 yards. As opposed to 53, that means you've got to have some pretty mobile people. 110 yards long, but the biggest difference, Tom, really is the end zone. It's a 25-yard end zone in the CFL. It's only 10 yards in the NFL. And I'll tell you, quarterbacks love that CFL end zone because you can do anything you want, run any pass pattern you want.
It's 25 deep by 65 wide.
Yeah.
That's
so,
big.
So, Don, if I have first and goal on the 5, I have a lot of options as a quarterback.
Absolutely, and a lot of room to work back there,
You've got
too.
your whole playbook is what you've got.
But you've only got 2 working downs, depending on where you are, close in, to get that ball over. 3 if you have to, whereas if you had to go to 4, you could grind it out in the NFL. So fewer downs, but more room in which to work.
Okay, what about the rouge point? We heard that a couple of times in the highlights, and a lot of people around the United States asked me last year, well, we understand everything, but how in the hell do they get 1 point now and then?
It's not something ladies use, although some do. And actually, the term rouge goes way back. It's really referred to as the single point now. The rouge, I really don't hear use that often.
I hear it when I come to the States. That's right.
That's right. Single point, which can be picked up in a number of ways, can be punted in. If the man doesn't return the ball, it's a single point. You can punt right out of the end zone for 1, or in a field goal. This is somewhat a contentious issue, too. If you're wide, you could get a single point that way if they don't bring it back out.
Now, you said something that confuses me. Punt out of the end zone. Explain that.
You can, as a matter of fact, punt the ball out of the end zone in a tight situation.
Right.
Say the game is tied at 21.
All right.
Last play of the game. I punted into your end zone. You're standing back there. You can kick it right back out again.
Because if I down it, I give you a point.
That's right. And conversely, I could also pick it up if I can get to it and punt it right back in one more time. This has happened in championship games at a tie situation.
What does a play-by-play man do?
Well, no, we're familiar with it. It's the American coaches that aren't. I'll never forget John Rauch, who had coached Oakland to a Super Bowl, came to Toronto as the head coach of the Argonauts in one game in Winnipeg with the score tied, just as Don had mentioned. The ball was kicked into the Toronto end zone. They kicked it back out. Winnipeg recovered it again and kicked it back in. And Toronto ended up losing the game. And I saw John in the lobby of the hotel after. He says, I'll be damned, I never saw anything like that in my lifetime.
Well, also to complicate it further is the fact that you must give 5 yards to the receiver.
Right.
So with all the scrambling around, people seldom do in that situation. So on the first or second or third exchange, somebody gets called for a no yards penalty, and that's it. But it can really be a decisive and exciting way to end a game.
I just want to make this point because it's very important to the American viewer. There is no such thing as a free catch. In other words, if you're fielding a punt, you must catch the ball and return it. We give you 5 yards to make that catch, and then there is unlimited blocking above the waist after you make the catch, but there is no fair catch.
Something I would like you to make clear to the American viewer, not 1, not 2, but as many people as you want. As I understand it, can be in motion going towards the line of scrimmage when the ball is snapped. We'll see an illustration of that coming up now. In the Edmonton backfield, we will circle the backs. 1, 2, and 3. Now, the ball has not been snapped yet. Warren Moon is coming out over the center, and watch them. Now, in the American game, this is illegal procedure, but 3 men were going forward before the snap of the ball. Gentlemen, why is that allowed, and what is the reasoning behind it?
Well, it's to open up the offense. Canadian football is a very offense-oriented game. In order for you to play defense in the CFL, you've got to be extremely mobile because of what you've just seen, the motion in the backfield, because of the wider field, and because, generally speaking, the people who are playing offense in Canada are smaller, faster people in the NFL.
Don, what about the defensive scheme of things? This has to put a lot of pressure on your defensive linebackers and defensive backs.
Yeah, you got a 12th man, of course, both ways, and that extra man usually is a deep back who has to cover these situations, but it does keep them scrambling when they all start moving like that. That's one concern I have about Ferragamo, is the kind of motion that comes into play in the CFL and the fact that he's not accustomed to it. We can talk about that later on, but he will have to move, I think, as he will find everybody else will be moving this year.
Very quickly, Don, we have 12 men on each side, as you just mentioned. Is that a big factor in Canadian football vis-a-vis American football?
If used properly, it is. Now, again, many coaches don't know how to handle that 12th man. He's the extra wide receiver in the CFL. And sometimes coaches have been known to leave him out there all day.
What they do is they really play 11-man football.
That's right.
No, they'll just put the
Forrest
flanker
Gregg
out
did that,
so
for
wide,
example.
and they'll just have to isolate a defensive back on them. So really what you're playing is 11-man football. But if you understand the Canadian game, and the successful coaches in the league who do, utilize that 12th guy.
Well, for years in the Canadian Football League, it has been said that the Eastern Division is a poor sister to the West. The West is really where all the powerhouses are. That was much the case last year. Only one team had a winning record in the Eastern Division. We'll talk about whether the Eastern Division can bounce back this year in 1981 and present a serious challenge to the Edmonton Eskimos in the '81 Grey Cup game when the CFL preview on ESPN continues in just a moment.
ESPN courts you with Sports Friday. Tennis is in top form when WCT's Challenge Cup is served up from Montreal. Then stay on the ball as Sports Center brings you the latest results from Center Court at Wimbledon. Later, it's the '81 opener of football, Canadian style, as Grey Cup champion Edmonton travels to Ottawa for live professional football from Canada. Catch all the action Friday on ESPN.
Throughout the offseason, the big story in football was this man, Vince Ferragamo. Saturday, the former Los Angeles Rams star makes his Canadian Football League debut on ESPN's Professional Football from Canada. Ferragamo and other U.S. stars like Billy White Shoes Johnson and David Overstreet lead the Montreal Alouettes versus the British Columbia Lions, live at 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 Pacific time. Will the Ferragamo to Johnson combo rewrite the CFL record books? Jim Simpson, Paul McGuire, and Fred Biletnikoff will be on hand to bring you the first chapter Saturday.
Look, if you're an investor who's tired of being too late when investments are heading up, too late when they're heading down, look ahead. Look into Barron's. Every week, Barron's gives you page after page of useful investment information, days, weeks, even months ahead. Every week, 34 pages of market statistics, in-depth studies of companies, a dividends and earnings alert on all New York Stock Exchange and Amex stocks, exclusive analyses covering the whole world of investing. All you need to know not to be too late every week in Barron's. If you call this toll-free number now, you can get 20 weeks of Barron's for just $21. Call right now, and you'll also get free Understanding Technical Forecasting, an informative booklet that shows you how professionals use Barron's. 20 weeks of Barron's plus this revealing booklet for only $21. Look ahead. Look into Barron's. Call 800-528-6050 now, before it's too late.
Welcome back to the 1981 CFL preview on ESPN. I'm Tom Mees in company with Pat Marsden and Don Chevrier. And gentlemen, when we talk about the Eastern Conference, we talk about the weak sister of the Canadian Football League. And we're going to take a look at the standings, the final standings from the regular season last year. And we will notice that the Hamilton Tiger Cats were winners, but maybe because nobody else really wanted the division. They were 8-7-1, and they score on the point system in the CFL, 2 points for a win and 1 for a tie. Just 1 point ahead of the Montreal Alouettes. And then you have Ottawa and Toronto, both under 500 records, and I guess that shows really the competitive weakness of the Eastern Conference as opposed to the West.
That was 1980. This is 1981. I guarantee you that the Eastern Conference is going to be the more exciting of the two conferences, and I say that because I am knocked out by Vince Ferragamo and Tom Clements coming back from Kansas City to the Hamilton Ticats. You're going to see a much, much better conference.
Don, what about you?
I agree. You'll see, because they have had to emphasize offense to sell tickets, the fans really were staying away toward the end of last season. And now with all the names there, they know that, well, not only to draw people, but to have a chance of beating Edmonton or top Western teams. It has to be an offensive shootout, and that's exactly what's going to happen. I'd say you'll have more high-scoring games this year, Pat, than I can recall for many years.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's going to be, without doubt, the highest scoring in the history of the league, and the CFL, for their history, have always outscored the National Football League.
And after all, isn't this what really the fans like to see, scoring? And we're going to see a lot of it this season if form holds up. Now, you would think with signing names like Vince Ferragamo and Billy White Shoes Johnson and James Scott, even though he isn't there yet, along with the #1 draft choice of the Miami Dolphins, David Overstreet, that there would be a lot of pressure on the Montreal Alouette coaching staff headed by Joe Scannella to produce a winner right now. I posed that question to Coach Scannella recently up in Montreal, and he admitted there is a lot of pressure on him.
I think there's a tremendous amount of pressure. I've been under pressure since I've first been here. The first year I came in, they came off a Grey Cup victory, a big victory, and Marv Levy had done a tremendous job with the team. I took over, we got to the Grey Cup, we didn't make it, we went the next year, we had the best season in the history of the club 2 years ago, and again we lost to Edmonton in the Grey Cup, but last year we kind of rebuilt our team in the middle of the year. We let quite a few veterans go, good guys, but we felt it was time to make a change, to bring in young people, which we did, and now our team this year is completely rebuilt. There's just a few people left from the '77 season, and pressure is tremendous. They want you to produce, and you could expect that they would want that, and I hope to have some patience because it is a new team with some young players, and by the end of the year, we'll be a very formidable team. We have to get a good start, however.
Well, Pat, we heard Joe Scannella say there is indeed a lot of pressure, and they have to get off to a good start. And with all that talent, and with a guy like Ferragamo, who we know can play anywhere on this earth, can play the game of football, do they have the talent to get that good start and get to the Grey Cup?
Well, Vince Ferragamo has only played 4 preseason games and really about a quarter and a little bit in all of those games, but he was very impressive last week in Hamilton in his final preseason outing, and that's what leads me to believe that Vince is now finding himself. I'm much more optimistic about how Vince Ferragamo is going to perform than Chevy is. Don feels that his lack of mobility is going to hurt him. I don't think it is, because Montreal has had a half-decent offensive line. I'm going to make this prediction for all you American viewers. Vince Ferragamo will throw a minimum of 25 touchdown passes, and when he sees that 25-yard deep end zone, he's going to think he's died and gone to heaven.
You sound like his agent, the way you're...
Well, I was talking to him yesterday. He's enthused, so it's rubbed off.
Don, what about your question about the mobility of Ferragamo? Certainly we saw how mobile a quarterback like Warren Moon is for Edmonton.
Yes, you've got to sprint out of trouble and ad-lib, as they say in this trade, because of the wide field, because of the pressures on you defensively, because of the fact that plays can get broken up very easily, and you've got to scramble. The greatest quarterbacks in the history of the CFL were scrambling quarterbacks. Russ Jackson, Ron Lancaster, people that can move the ball. Joe Theismann liked to run around pretty well and does it down in the NFL.
There was a guy by the name of Tobin Road and another one by the name of Sam Etcheverry that threw the ball very effectively and had a great deal of success.
Yes, they did. Etcheverry in particular with a long and outstanding career up there. I'm not saying Ferragamo won't do well. I agree with Pat. He will. But I want to reserve comment until I can see how he does handle the pressure when he has to bail out of that pocket and fend for himself. That's what I want to see first.
Okay, now let's get to the Hamilton Tiger Cats. They are the defending Eastern Division champion. They have a new coach in Frank Cush. How is Cush going to do, and how are the Tiger Cats going to do with Tom Clements back at the helm?
Well, everybody seems to think that the Eastern Conference has been awarded to the Montreal Alouettes. I wouldn't do that. First of all, as everybody knows, Frank Cush is a tremendous coach. He has gotten back this year Tom Clements, to me, one of the great quarterbacks in the CFL. They've got